All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the LinkedIn Live event, Composable CDP Mythbusters with Hightouch and Snowflake. Although you may have joined us for our last conversation on composable CDPs, this is likely going to be the first and hopefully not last Mythbusters LinkedIn Live specials, where we focus on debunking some of the biggest myths associated with composable CDPs. So before we get started, just a few housekeeping items. We have a packed agenda for a 30-minute broadcast. We're going to do our best to save some time at the end for questions, so please feel free to submit any on the stream as we go. The session will be recorded and shared on YouTube, so also don't worry if you or your teammates have to catch up at a later point in time. So to kick things off, let's start out with some introductions. My name is Alec Hazy, and I'm a product and marketing lead here at Hightouch. I oversee marketing as well as product for Hightouch's marketing personas and use cases. Fun fact, I was actually a customer of Hightouch as a director of data products at Red Ventures for about a year before jumping over to join the team. Now today I'm joined by the awesome Lorenzo Mello. Lorenzo, do you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Yeah, absolutely, Alec. Great to be here with you again. We had a lot of fun last time. We had to bring it back and do it again. My name is Lorenzo Mello. I'm a product marketer here at Snowflake. And actually, we have relatively similar roles, Alec. I'm actually also on point for the marketing persona and the marketing use cases here at Snowflake. So very much looking forward to this one today with you.
All right, thanks, Lorenzo. So since we'll be spending a majority of the time today discussing the myths associated with the composable CDP, I think it's most helpful to start off by walking through exactly what a CDP is and why organizations are turning to a new composable CDP architecture to solve their biggest customer data problems. From there, we can dive into the top 5 myths and hopefully leave some time at the end for questions. So Lorenzo, where do you want to start?
Yeah, I think the most logical place to start is actually with this incredible diagram that we really can't decipher much of what's going on here by design, right? It shows the evolution of the MarTech space and just how incredibly fragmented the space has really become, but also the unprecedented growth that the MarTech space has experienced over the past decade. I think this diagram in 2011 was 150 applications. The version you're looking at now, 11 years later, is around 10,000, right? But while this diagram actually shows some positives, which is the incredible innovation in this space, what it doesn't show directly is that each of these pixels that you're seeing here actually represents a tool or technology that in all likelihood created an unintended consequence of having created a new data silo, which in turn made it extremely difficult for marketers to operate from a single source of truth. So Alec, you know all too well, that's actually the primary mission that CDP set out to tackle and kind of resulted in the inception or the emergence of the category over the last decade or so.
Yeah, that's right. So if we take a closer look at legacy kind of off-the-shelf CDPs, we can anchor on some of their high-level goals that address the data silos issues that you just mentioned, as well as kind of their core functionality. So starting off here, all CDPs have at least 3 core components, the first being data collection. So since CDPs are a database of customer data, they need to give you a way to send data to them. So to solve this, CDPs expose an API for developers to track the events users take across websites and mobile applications. The second one is data storage and modeling. So CDPs usually have an out-of-the-box identity stitching functionality and tools to create some custom traits on user profiles. Now, that last component is then data activation. So CDPs are pretty much useless unless they help you actually act on your data. So they have integrations that enable you to sync enrich profiles and audience builders to help send segments down to your various marketing channels. So while CDPs were an early hit for marketers, as time went on, they began to fall short from meeting the complex needs of modern organizations. These shortcomings were caused by a number of reasons, but the primary one was that their architecture was fundamentally flawed. So early CDPs promised to have a 360 view of customers, but the reality was that it only had a portion of the organization's data. While they did have events being collected from web and mobile, there were a number of sources of data left out. All their sources were, however, being fed into the data cloud. So marketers and data teams started to collide on what was actually their source of truth, the data cloud or the CDP. The next pain points really centered around cost, flexibility, and time to value. We all know that CDPs are expensive, they're rigid, and require months of work before you can even think about activation. But I don't want to spend too much time on here, though. If you want to learn more about those pain points, you can check out cdpsaredead.com. Lorenzo, anything else to add here?
Yeah, I think you touched on the key point, which is just operating with a portion of the data, right? So from a marketing standpoint, let's say you wanted to measure something as critical to your organization as customer lifetime value. You likely have to move and copy data around between the CDP and, in this case, your Snowflake instance. Or if you don't have, for example, your customer support data next to your marketing campaign data, you might actually risk targeting someone that is frustrated with your brand currently, which obviously lands really poorly from an experience standpoint, or even issues around not having your ERP data in the same data repository. These are significant limitations that this architecture brings that actually handicap your ability to do proper marketing the way that we believe modern marketing should be done. And so naturally, marketers, what happened and what this led to, marketers started to realize that. And what happened over the course of the next few years in parallel was that Snowflake became present and ubiquitous and became the norm for organizations. It became the standard for organizations that wanted to and really needed to eliminate data silos and ultimately work from a single source of truth across all of their data for all their analytics use cases. And also the thinking became, building one source of truth is hard. So why would I want to build two, right? And that resulted in the fact that over the last decade or so, nearly every company, or I should say certainly every modern company, has really invested in building out its data analytics and business intelligence practice. So in almost every case, data is collected from various sources and moved to a central repository or location in Snowflake to build clean data models or tables and really answer important questions via BI tools, for example.
Exactly. And the emergence of the data cloud as that organization's source of truth is actually what led to the founding of Hightouch. So, as early engineers at Segment, one of the early and most well known CDPs, our founding team saw that opportunity where CDPs were inaccurate, incomplete, and expensive, but they were actionable. The data cloud, on the other hand, had a 360 view of customer data and was comparatively less expensive, but the data was stuck inside. So, they took their experience building CDPs and decided to create Hightouch, a data activation platform that leverages a technology coined reverse ETL. Hightouch unlocks the value of the data cloud, enabling both marketing and data teams alike to activate data now from Snowflake and send it out to the many business tools. Doing so lays the foundation of this new composable CDP architecture that centers on the data cloud as the single source of customer truth, breaking down the data silos created by now redundant CDPs and offering a much more flexible and secure solution to the problems that CDPs were starting to address. Now, enough overview here. Let's get to the fun part and start busting some myths.
And Alec, let me just say that all the viewers just won by seeing that picture of us together there. I think you and I are forever immortalized on the internet with this one. So well done with this one.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So myth number one, Alec, this one is for you. I'm a marketer. I need marketing tooling, right? The composable CDP isn't for me. And I need something more intuitive that kind of stays away from the technical things like SQL and everything that's kind of core data. Is this a myth or is this true?
Well, that is in fact a myth. So that probably used to be something close to accurate, but as Hightouch evolved, we realized that there was an opportunity or even an importance to support all users regardless of their technical skill set. So through the development of Hightouch audiences, marketers are now able to use a marketer-first no-code UI to create granular customer segments that can then be activated out to any business and marketing tool like Salesforce, Facebook, Google, and more. This allows modern teams to manage activation of all of their customer data centrally while giving the data and marketing teams tools they need to do their jobs more efficiently. Again, all from that single source of truth.
Right. So what you're stating is that Hightouch has a UI that is sufficiently intuitive that marketers can operate with, let's call it absolute autonomy and leverage that agility that is really, really critical to create audiences and run the most effective campaigns in a composable CDP model. But as you know, Alec, I think Mythbusters, we don't just say things, right? We actually want to show things as much as we can, not just telling people. So do you actually have a view of what that UI looks like?
Exactly. I just refreshed this GIF here, but you can all start to see as this GIF runs the different features that we have. So Hightouch has a number of those marketer first features that we're building upon. Things like priority lists, splits, traits, and insights all center on making audience management seamless at scale, from anyone from a small startup all the way up to an enterprise customer.
That's perfect. So I think it's safe to say that we can bust this myth, right? We need the sound effects for the next one of this, but we need a big bang,
Myth
big
number
myth
one is
buster.
busted. There we go.
Exactly. All right, let's move on to myth number two, right? This one is that organizations with entire teams of data engineers can build and manage their own composable CDP, right? Folks often feel that they can't even get started until they have a fully modeled customer 360 in Snowflake. What do you think, Alec? Is this true? Do you need an existing customer 360 in Snowflake, a fully robust one, before you can get started with a composable CDP and start activating your data?
No, not at all. And I can speak to this one firsthand at my last organization. We did not have that full customer 360 when we initially started with Hightouch, and we just started to activate what we had, right? So you can get started by activating your existing data in the data cloud. Most organizations already store some data sets in Snowflake, and they can begin activating on just that. As time goes on, though, and you develop more in-depth data sets or include things like ML propensity models or start to iterate off of your customer 360, you can then start to incorporate those tables and begin activating those as well. So it's actually really common for us to see teams starting the composable CDP journey by solving more simple use cases like a simple purchaser audience sync for suppression or lookalike to Facebook, where you really only need an email address for your purchase events, right? There's not a lot of modeling that you would need to go into that more simple use case. But like I said, the composable approach lets you take it one step at a time without needing to have everything in one place in that full 360 view.
Yeah, and it's totally iterative. You'll add some things to your customer 360 and improve your marketing campaigns over time, but you can get started with something relatively light. So I think it's safe to say that we're 2 for 2. This myth is also busted. Starting to think we might have skewed it a little bit, Alec, but let's move forward to myth number 3. So this one's an interesting one. I'd love your take on this one. Any real detractor of the composable CDP will list this one as a myth. What would you tell someone that says that the composable CDP doesn't enable real-time use cases? Is this one a myth or is this one true?
So this is a fun one. With the composable CDP, you can activate data as quickly as you have it available in Snowflake. So high touch syncs can be set to any recurrence. This, however, is not real time, but what we find is that's actually okay. And whenever we dig into when customers ask for real time, we see that real time is actually widely misinterpreted. And in almost all cases, data fresh within a couple, let's say 5 to 15 minutes is even totally appropriate. So 90% of the use cases are actually met with this composable CDP and that kind of sync cadence for the 5 to kind of 15-minute window.
So would you say that customers typically need to operate kind of with real-time use cases? I mean, don't most use cases that they run today typically maybe not require the full real time? I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah. So like I said, like most of the time we realize that customers don't actually need real time.
Mhm.
But when they do, direct API calls are actually the best solution to power things like transactional email sends, right? So you can make in this diagram here, you can see a transactional use case where you're just going straight from your server to your marketing automation platform. We actually see that being the best solution, regardless of whether or not you have a CDP off the shelf or a composable approach. So all that said, we are actually actively exploring streaming sources to also make this even easier through Hightouch. So I think it's safe to say we can call this not busted, but we're going to leave an asterisk on you don't actually need it as much as you think you do.
Sounds good.
All right, so here's a fun one that our CDP friends love to push out. It sounds like in a composable architecture, given I need Snowflake and Hightouch, both contracts there, in addition to additional compute costs, that it's got to be more expensive, right?
Yeah, I think that one is a tricky one because it depends what we're comparing. We got to keep it at kind of apples and apples, oranges and oranges, right? I think it depends on the starting point of the customer's existing systems and the tools. But I think generally speaking, we can say that it's a myth if we kind of outline it a little bit. So the reason is that many of the organizations are moving towards Snowflake anyway for their core data platform and leveraging the data cloud and core workloads like data warehousing, data science, data lake, even things that allow for modern applications and cybersecurity. So for an organization that has opted to really eliminate organizational data silos and is working with Snowflake today, then in that scenario, it's actually less expensive to work with the composable CDP model because it leverages your existing investments made in Snowflake. So this slide here, let's kind of walk through it a little bit, right? In a scenario where a customer is using Snowflake today, but has kind of a fundamentally flawed architecture, the one you showed before, Alec, that requires a package CDP to be kind of a separate silo, then they're paying for the ingestion tooling and the systems to pull all their data into Snowflake. They're paying for Snowflake itself and using some of those core workloads that I mentioned earlier. They're paying for a package CDP as kind of that separate source of truth. And if the architecture is flawed, like the diagram up top shows, then kind of even the cost of having engineering pipes between both of these sources of truth is an extra cost, right? So alternatively, when we look at the kind of the bottom row with that composable CDP, you're going to pay for, again, the ingestion tooling and systems to put all your data into Snowflake. You're again paying for, Snowflake itself and using some of those core workloads. But then you're paying for, the Hightouch in this case, and kind of that reverse ETL to be able to activate your data directly into your marketing channel. So typically organizations are already starting with a Fivetran and certainly with Snowflake, therefore only need to add that data activation layer to really make their data actionable and make the most out of their existing implementations and investments in Snowflake.
Yeah, so you'll always need the data cloud, right? Regardless of your CDP architecture. So then it becomes about comparing what tools you're paying for, and in which case Hightouch is actually less expensive when held side by side with any major CDP player, right? We've seen plenty of organizations even leverage their spend on a composable CDP architecture to meet their marketplace spend minimum. So you can even find some dollars there as well. So safe to say, I think this one is busted. All right, so heading into our last myth, this one ties back a bit to our earlier chat on the difficulty of getting started. So aside from data modeling, the integration aspect of a composable CDP can often sound like a pretty hefty task. So Lorenzo, mind sharing if we can debunk that integrating multiple systems, in this case, Snowflake and Hightouch, is hard to do or time consuming?
Yeah, absolutely. And this one we get, I think, quite a bit just based on how important it is for us and working in partnership and tandem with our ecosystem. I think what makes that easy is actually Snowflake Partner Connect, right? So what that is a feature that lets you easily create trial accounts with selected Snowflake partners like Hightouch and integrate these accounts with Snowflake. So this feature provides, like, I think, a really easy to use and convenient option for trying third-party tools and technologies and then adopting the ones that best meet your business needs. So thanks to Partner Connect, launching Hightouch could not be easier or more secure directly to Snowflake. It takes all but a couple of clicks to really get started and get a fully integrated workspace up and running to begin activating Snowflake data. Whether that's kind of your first steps, again, back to your previous point, Alec, whether you have a fully baked customer 360 or you're just leveraging some of the data in that exists in your Snowflake, it's really easy to just get started. So I'm pretty sure your first destination in Hightouch, I think, is even free, if I'm not mistaken. Alec, keep me honest there.
Yes, sir. This allows teams to quickly and easily begin activating their data to see if this composable architecture is something that they want to pursue further. So I think it is safe to say our fifth and final myth is busted.
All right, we went 4 for 5, Alec.
Hey, I don't hate it. The one being an asterisk, it's not bad. So I think right now, if anyone wants to submit any additional questions in the chat, feel free to do so. For those interested in getting started, you can visit snowflakecdp.com. We have a nice little ebook there to dive in further to Snowflake and Hightouch's composable architecture. If you have any questions, comments, please feel free to email Alec at Hightouch or Lorenzo.mello@Snowflake. We'd love to chat with you all. Feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn as well. I'm pretty sure you can just see that right in the presentation today, but would love to connect. I'm not.
Yeah, and I think, Alec, one of the things that I also want to call attention to is just some of the momentum in terms of customer stories that we have constantly coming out. We just launched one relatively recent with IntelliCare, and the headline is they grew 300% during COVID and saved $1 million in marketing spend with Hightouch, Snowflake, and Fivetran. So this is an example of a customer that took this composable CDP approach and ultimately changed their business completely and was ultimately able to, looks like 300% growth during a really difficult time for a lot of organizations. So I encourage everybody in the audience to also go look at some of those stories, starting with the IntelliCare one that I mentioned, and really take a look at those, and feel free to reach out to us. And we definitely welcome any questions from people.
Yeah, and huge shout out to the IntelliCare on that one. That team continues to crush it and just show what's possible with a composable CDP approach. So love what they're doing over there. All right, well, it doesn't look like we have any questions coming in, so we can kill it here, but appreciate everyone tuning in. Like we said, we'll share this out. It'll be posted on YouTube. Please, again, feel free to reach out to us. And as everyone's logging off, I'll hop back to our favorite image of the two of us.
Hey, thanks for having me, Alec. Appreciate this, and looking forward to the next session we do together.
It's always fun, man. Always fun.
All right.